What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to the Brooklyn Buzz. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jack Manuel. Jack, how you doing?
Big matchup tonight, my friends.
Yes, big game, crucial game before this road trip starts next week. So obviously the Hawks are no joke. We've won 4 straight against them, 7 of the last 8. We were at the last matchup where the Nets picked up the W. Are you excited going to this matchup? Scared? What is your feeling?
I'm quite nervous because I've been looking at the schedule and the Hawks are on nice form. We've been lucky enough to see them play the last time we versed them, and they got a nice little head start against us. So there's some elements of nerves and butterflies. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a pressure situation. I think the Nets know the road trip is approaching, and this is a game that they can easily win. You know, the Hawks aren't going to give it to them, but they've beaten them, like I said, 4 straight times, 7 of the last 8. There's a couple areas where they've really dominated them in the past, you know, scoring. The Hawks also turnover percentage, I think, is last in the league in turnovers per game, turnover percentage, and then also defensive rating is like bottom 10. So there's areas where the Nets can attack in this game. They just have to play engaged for 48 minutes instead of one of these half-ass performances.
This is the easiest game we have in our remaining 14, Nick. So if we can't, put up some good form and get some momentum heading into the toughest stretch in the NBA, according to Tankathon, then I don't know what we're going to do because it's a pretty bleak look ahead in terms of the games that we have. But, you look at one game at a time, as we've sort of repeated, and I've repeated at length. But hopefully we can just start off the game well and build off of that.
Yeah, and that's not what they did last time in that first quarter. I think they were down 20 when we were there, and then they came back in the second half. But, Jack, you talked about gaining momentum. What are some areas you want the Nets to gain momentum in this game? Is it certain players? Is it guys getting hot from three? Is the offense continuing to get in sync? Defense? What is it?
Yeah, I think offensively, Nick, I think that's where we really need to sort of make a mark, get that ball moving. I think that sort of gets everyone involved. Theo Pinson is active again tonight. I'm wondering what role he'll play or whether he'll just be the glue guy on the bench, so to speak, dancing, getting those signature dance moves going. I think it's a positive whenever he's there, no matter what he's doing, mind you. But I think offensively, we need to get that ball moving. Hopefully LeVert shows a little bit more form. We hit the 3 ball a little bit, but obviously the defense feeds that offense. So we just need to be engaged and just play and do the solid fundamentals, rebound well. Things that we've sort of lapsed in certain periods of the season, making them fundamentals. And, a lot of them just require commitment and the right mentality.
Yeah, building good habits pretty much. Like you said, defense, rebounding, offense getting in sync. I think another thing, an area we want to see is rotations. See if we're going to see the same 9-10-man rotation we've been seeing the last few games. Obviously, it looks like Rodions is going to start again. But, how's he going to handle D'Lo, Dinwiddie, and LeVert? We kind of talked about in the last show, do we want to see 2 or 3 of those guys on the floor at all times other than maybe the first few minutes of the first quarter and third quarter?
Yeah, and the starters via our boy Brian Fonseca are going to be the same: Russell Crabb, Harris, Kurutz, and Allen. I think they've shown some nice form together so far. Whether that remains for the rest of the season, we'll have to wait and see, obviously. But I think, how Coach Kenny continues to maintain and juggle those rotations is going to be a key sort of thing for the coaching staff, finding that chemistry, finding that balance. The things are sort of happening. We saw little bits and pieces in the Cavs game. Spencer Dinwiddie's hit some form, which was all obviously very nice. We're still looking for that sort of massive breakout Caris LeVert game. But, even if he doesn't show it, he was still really, really good and has his moments. So I think it's all going to be all those things sort of coming together. You can't necessarily expect all to come together at once. But if they do tonight, then that's going to be a really good sign.
One guy I think that the Nets would be really happy about, and they could probably take him to another level if he were to get hot like he did at the end of last season, is Allen Crabbe. He's been kind of hot and cold since coming back. If he could get some momentum, I think that'd be big.
Oh, it'd be absolutely huge, with the best three-point shooter in the league, Joe Harris, alongside him. And I think, was it John Schumann tweeting out that the fact that he's top 5 in three-point percentage from the
corner
corners?
Threes, yep.
So obviously, if we can find him some looks there, run some plays for him there, get him some confidence going. Obviously, shooters, it's all about rhythm and confidence, and we know Joe Harris has that in spades. Allen Crabbe has had it in spurts, like you mentioned, Nick, but it has certainly been up and down. So we'll obviously see how it goes. I think finding the balance in terms of minutes sort of started in sort of Cleveland matchup. We saw 20 minutes from Ed Davis, those sort of types. Damari Carroll continuing to have 25 to 30. I think we really need to make an impact in this sort of game because momentum is going to be huge, and we need to have some confidence heading into a really, really, really tough road stretch.
Yeah, no, definitely. Any type of confidence, momentum, good habits developed in this game would benefit the team. Now, Jack, what are some matchups you want to talk about? What about, how are the Nets going to defend John Collins tonight, who's pretty much dominated them in their two previous matchups?
Yeah, he's been massive. I think that's where you chuck your boy Rhodey on him, because I think as well with Allen, he's probably going to have just the logical matchup with a guy like Dwayne Dedman. So I think both of those two match up. Both of those players in Dedman and Collins tend to play well against us. Collins is a very, very talented player, especially offensively. And, Trae Young has been in absolutely sizzling form of late. So I think he's going to be one to watch. And D'Angelo's certainly going to have to maintain his stature on the defensive end as well, because Trae Young, especially at home, the home crowd's going to be going for him. Whether the Migos boys are out in full force, we'll have to wait and see. But he's been sensational. So they're a very dangerous team, and they're probably playing better basketball than the Nets have. They're sort of taken, a similar sort of style, so to speak. The young up-and-coming coach, these really young up-and-coming players. So they're a team to watch out for.
Yeah, especially Trae Young. You mentioned in the previous two matchups, he wasn't amazing. I think one game he might have had, 20-plus points, but it wasn't great shooting splits. Since All-Star break, he's been probably one of the better players, one of the best guards in the league. So the Nets need to keep physical with him, not allow him to really line it up from three, because we know he can take a three from like 5 feet back behind the line.
Yeah, and I think as well with a guy like Trae Young, punish him on the defensive end. If you get like the switches on him, you get D'Angelo Russell to just shoot over the kid. He's tiny compared to him. Same as Spencer Dinwiddie. Shoot over him, drive into him, draw some fouls off of him. He has been absolutely insane in terms of his shooting splits. Have to watch out for his passing as well. We know, I think everyone who has watched him play knows how insane of a passer he is. And if anything, it matches, if not exceeds, his shooting acumen. So he's going to be an absolutely dangerous player. They've got a nice sort of built team right now. So it's just going to be able to hold their momentum, continuing to play our game. And just, I think the key, a lot of the guys spoke about when I saw some quotes, was just getting stops against the Cavs when they were making their run. So if we just focus on one possession at a time, play what the defense and the offense is giving us, then, I think we should be able to get the job done. It's just how well we can do it across the 4 quarters.
Yeah, one thing I think, the Nets having the vets and being a little bit more experienced need to be more physical. Teams have done that to them in the past. Now it's their turn to do it to a younger team, a team that doesn't necessarily have the vets on their roster like the Nets do. You like to see a guy like Ed Davis come in here and really dominating the boards and body some of the guys, because not necessarily the best bigs. Alex Len's been pretty good for them, but not an amazing center by any standard.
No, and he's been serviceable. He's apparently been practicing with nunchucks, I believe. Maybe he's trying to audition for the next John Wick 4, to take Boban's spot. I'm not sure about that. But they've got this nice array of players that is similar to what the Brooklyn Nets have, and they're sort of building something in a similar sort of sense. A lot of sort of people have jumped on the Atlanta bandwagon of late in terms of the fact that, if they were to land another nice young free agent, another nice young piece in the draft, as well as that second piece, depending on what the Dallas pick ends up being, they're building something here. So I think we need to be wary of that and the form that they have played in, because we can't be off. If you can't remain engaged at this point of the season, in the last 14, 15 games, then there's no real point. And I'm hoping that the leadership of guys like Damari Carroll, Jared Dudley, Ed Davis, these guys sort of step up and go, let's set the tone right now. And I think having Spencer back as well certainly helps that too.
Yeah, I definitely think having Spencer back, and he's another guy that can kind of attack Trae Young. We know how good he is at isolating players and getting to the rim. Somebody who's definitely a lot smaller than him. In terms of matchups on the net side, D'Angelo Russell's really had some good success in this matchup. Do you think he'll look to do that again tonight? The Nets are going to look to rely on him, or is it going to be more of a team approach?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. D'Lo just has the utmost confidence right now, and I think he's starting to just read the game at a really high level. So, his mid-ranger is on point, his floater is on point, and he's just become absolutely lethal from that three-point line. And we know how good of a passer he is. That D'Lo-Rhodey connection is a thing of beauty. So I think he's probably going to look for him a little bit early. Rhodey's always making cuts for some reason. I don't know why people just don't read the scouting report on him. Likes to make them early, likes to get that steal and slam as well. So I think D'Lo, it's about him just being able to continue reading the game and just giving if it means passing a little bit more and finding his teammates, getting that ball moving a little bit, or if it means, taking those pull-up threes because they're smooth. And he's always got guys reaching and everything. So I think it's a sham god move. I don't think we've got a chance to speak about that at length, but dear Lord, that was beautiful.
Yeah, he puts Jetty in a freaking spin move. He was so confused. He didn't know where the ball was. You're talking about the pull-up threes. I thought D'Lo's done a good job in terms of just shooting threes in general and being able to draw the foul. And I think that's something he's going to be able to do as the future progresses, because his skill set he has, his fake game is on point. But Jack, talking keys for the Nets, what are a couple keys for tonight? You can go one by one, or you can list them all.
Yeah, I think just off the top of my head, Nick, we touched on it a little bit earlier, it's just rebounding on both ends of the floor. I think that during that sort of poor stretch where we were winning games and losing games but not showing the best sort of form, the activity on the glass wasn't great. We saw guys like, Jared Allen putting up like 3 rebounds and such. He had a nice little double-double the other night, so hopefully that gives him some nice sort of form and consistency heading into this one. So, and I think, guys like Dwayne Dedman, John Collins, these guys are really good rebounders, so they're not going to make it easy in terms of, boxing out and such. They're pretty physical as well, despite the fact that, we've got a guy like Ed Davis who is probably one of the most physical backup big men in the league. So I think the glass on both ends of the floor, getting those extra possessions, getting Ed Davis, just being able to read the ball off the glass there, and it just finishes the defensive possessions. Just allows you to sort of just settle things down, get your offense set, and just make things that little bit easier in terms of, just on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, 100%. I think rebounding is an area where they can attack them a little bit. They do have some good rebounders, like you said, in Collins and Dedman and Len, but they are bottom 10 in rebounding percentage in terms of total rebound percentage, also defensive rebounding. So Nets attack the offensive boards. A guy like Ed Davis, when we were at the game, he just pretty much dominated that game. He just out-muscled a lot of the guys down low. I think an important thing for the Hawks is, like I said, they're the last in the league in turnover percentage. Make them earn it offensively. Don't give them easy shots, especially to start the game as well. Make sure you get your buckets. Don't give them easy offensive possessions on your end either. Make sure you're passing the ball, getting good shots or great shots. Don't settle for bad shots.
Yeah, we sort of know what they like to do schematically. They're a similar sort of offensive team to us. They really like the perimeter. They like to sort of attack inside. So it's sort of like a clash of similar matchups in many ways. So if we can sort of, outplay them, we have more talent, we have more depth, we have better form, then there are going to be games of runs within a 48-minute basketball game. So obviously, how Coach Kenny manages that, when he calls the timeouts, when he makes the substitutions. Does he leave guys out there for that little bit longer if D'Angelo Russell's a little bit hot, if Joe Harris is a little bit hot, if Alan Crabb or Rodions is a little bit hot? So I think throughout the game, the coaching battle, because I think Lloyd Pierce has done a really nice job in terms of developing the team, developing some nice chemistry as well. So I think that's one fascinating thing, sort of side thing to watch for throughout the game too.
You mentioned the runs. I would probably say in terms of like team series this year for the Nets, the quarter differential for the matchups in these games have been pretty crazy. In the first matchup, I want to say the Nets went up by 20 in the first quarter. Second quarter, the Hawks made a run. In that second half, the Nets pulled away. The game that we were at, the Hawks went up big in that first quarter. Nets kind of worked out of the second quarter. Third and fourth, they pulled away and had a big win. So it's just like this is definitely a game of runs, especially against a young team where I think you can kind of have an influence on their momentum and their confidence. But, Jack, who's due for a big game that'll lead to a Nets win tonight?
I'm going to go with D'Angelo Russell. I think this is the sort of point. He always has big games. It's just I think he's due for a sort of statement game. We sort of Spencer Dinwiddie, whether it's 30 points plus, hitting threes and 8 assists or something like that. I think D'Angelo's going to have a big one. And I think that he's going to show, Trae Young's been getting plenty of hype, but I think D'Angelo, low key, he's going to want to make his name heard.
Yeah, I like it. I like D'Angelo, especially like you said, kind of making this a game because Trae Young is getting a lot of hype, but also D'Angelo's done a good job of kind of attacking some of the lesser teams this year, putting up big performances. In terms of the bench, who's going to pop off and have a big one?
Is this just a cop-out answer saying DeMarre Carroll?
No, I don't think so. I think you easily could have went with Dinwiddie or LeVert. So, I think DeMarre's a good choice. The bench is stacked. Like, the Nets bench is very, very good.
We have one of the best benches in the league, I would say. Probably the Clippers are the only team that could probably match us, and they've been awesome this season. Absolutely outstanding. And our boy Will Jackson, who is in the chat with us right now and a writer at OTG, is going to have a piece for the other guys on DeMarre Carroll. He just continues to go under the radar, and his role with the team this season has been absolutely outstanding. I think his importance tonight as well, a former Atlanta Hawk as well. Obviously, there's not it's a completely different franchise, but he knows Atlanta. He knows just how he knows the moments. He's had the history, and obviously with Jared Dudley sort of being another sort of secondary leader, but not having the sort of capabilities to get out there on the court and be an on-court leader. DeMarre Carroll's presence has just been so important throughout this entire season.
Yeah, I think DeMarre doing his little caroling in this game, especially when Atlanta goes on a run to kind of break it up, will be an important thing. He can just make those plays. We mentioned rebounding. DeMarre's been pretty good in the offensive boards, especially, stealing the ball quickly when they get the rebound. So something to keep an eye on. I think I'm going to go with Karis LeVert. I think this is a good opportunity for him to get some momentum going against a lesser bench unit, against like a team like Atlanta. He can work inside, maybe get some buckets for himself and build that momentum. Jack, prediction on the game.
I think the Nets win it by 8.
This is like the most confidence I've ever heard from Jack in my entire Nets life.
I did preface right at the start of the pod about how bloody nervous and how many butterflies I have getting into this matchup because I don't think it's going to be easy. And I think 8 points is a margin that isn't going to leave me very comfortable throughout the entire 4 quarters. I would much prefer to have a 15 to 20 point margin, get off to a nice lead, and then you can sort of insert the backups out there. But just touching on it as well, Nick, before you give yours, we sort of touched on it a little bit, but Atlanta's sort of backups, that's one area where we should really look to attack them. And I think we've got such a really stacked second unit with Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Ed Davis. There are just so many good guys there. And obviously I mentioned DeMarre Carroll as well. So I think we really need to make an impact. Hopefully our starters, match them, give us a little bit of lead. And the backups can sort of just do their thing. And, I think that we've just got way more talent in terms of from 1 to 9.
Yeah, I think the backups could easily just win this game for the Nets, where even if the starters just kind of evened out with the Atlanta starters, the Nets bench unit is so much better than Atlanta's. They could really have a huge game. I'm going to go with, let's say, the Nets by 10, maybe 110 to 100. I think it'll be a relatively close game. The Nets will be in control, but Atlanta's going to, have their runs. But at the end of the day, similar to Cleveland, they're just going to pull away and get the W.
Yeah, and I think that's where we really need to have not necessarily just the leadership from the guys on the court in terms of just being able to get the stops and make the big buckets every now and then. But I harped on it a little bit with Coach Kenny just being able to time certain things, when to make the substitutions, when to call the timeouts. And he's done that a lot better throughout the latter part of the season than he did in the early part of the season, where guys, well, why didn't he call that part earlier? Why is he taking this guy out? Why isn't he doing this? So I've mentioned it. I think that it goes under the radar quite a bit in terms of how important the coaches are in certain matchups. And this individual matchup, I think Coach Kenny isn't going to be the be-all and end-all, but he's going to have a part to play.
Yeah, I mean, coaches really only get talked about when they're doing a bad job and the team's losing. So if the team's winning, then no one really cares. I think also, like we've talked about this before on previous shows last year, this year, it's development for Kenny as well. Like, he's not a finished product. He's still working on his coaching style, and he's talked about it. It's been night and day from last year to this year. So different experience, better players, guys improving this year, definitely something different. Any other topics you want to touch on, Jack, before we get out of here?
Oh, very nice question from Zane Nathani. Just put in this playoff push, do you think Ed Davis needs to be playing a bit more over Allen? I think Collins can give Allen some problems today. A fair observation.
Yeah, I think there's situations where we've talked about it. Ed Davis could play more minutes than Jared Allen, and especially when we get to the playoffs or in this playoff stretch where every win kind of matters. And I think the Nets have kind of changed their goals for the season. Expectations weren't necessarily to make the playoffs, but now that they're right there and they maintained a playoff spot for months now, it's important for them to get into the playoffs. So maybe you play Ed Davis a couple more minutes, where in the past, if you weren't looking for the playoffs, you'd care more about development. But right now, I think W's might mean a little bit more than Jared Allen getting more minutes than Ed Davis.
I think that they certainly do at this point of the season, Nick. I think Jared Allen is the kind of guy that isn't going to be complaining. He's not going to be, on the bench saying, "Oh, why is this backup guy getting 5 minutes more than me in a certain matchup?" But I think it's a fair observation because guys like John Collins and those more physical sort of guys can have their way with Jared Allen at times, and he has improved in that aspect, but he still has a ways to go. Whereas Ed Davis, in terms of his physicality, that's one area you cannot question. Jared Allen has a lot more finesse and a lot more refinement in terms of his game. So I think we'll certainly see. That's one thing to certainly watch, especially as we head into Detroit in the next matchup as well. So this matchup is sort of like, I guess, a mini precursor to coming up against some future guys, because Dwayne Dedmon and John Collins are great. Alex Len's okay as well, but guys like Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, who have been absolutely sensational of late. You'd want to get some form tonight into both of our bigs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said, it's pretty much matchups. Like there might be matchups if somebody's going small, you don't play Ed Davis as much because they're trying to isolate him on the perimeter. So it's just kind of adjustments. That's something we've talked about this year, how the Nets as the players, the coaches, and everybody on the squads kind of improve adjusting to their opponent. And that's going to be a big test going towards the playoffs, getting in the playoffs. And then if you do make the playoffs, adjusting because it's a 7-game matchup, it's going to be the same team. It's completely different from the regular season.
Oh, absolutely, and I think we've spoken about it at length. You know, proactive rather than reactive. SSV has jumped in. How will the Nets stop Trey? He's made a suggestion. Maybe you put Joe Harris on him. I mean, you could put Joe Harris on John Collins, and that's going to work out fine.
I think it's tough. I think the Nets could end up putting Allen Crabbe on him because he might be the most athletic out of the perimeter guys they have. D'Angelo will probably start him. It doesn't work out. They probably go to Allen Crabbe. And then when they get to the bench shooting, it'll be Dinwiddie or Karis LeVert because they're a little bit quicker. I think the most important thing is putting a body on him. And if he wants to shoot mid-range jump shots, floaters, and whatnot, the Nets will live with that. They don't want him shooting threes. They don't want him getting to the rim.
Yeah, I think what's going to be more important is that team defense because Trey has been better at sort of driving, kicking out. So I think the pressure we put on whatever ball handler it is going to be more important than sort of the individual man-to-man defense. And I think that's what the Nets have been struggling with quite a bit at times this season when it comes to our defense, schematically, be it the zone defense or just one-on-one, and just keeping that communication. If Joe Harris loses him because Trae Young has just that slick handle, who's going to be backing him up, in terms of the wings and in terms of the bigs. So I think schematically, communication, all that sort of team defense is going to be really, really important in stopping a guy like Trae Young, who has been one of the form players of the NBA, not just in terms of rookies.
Yeah, I think physicality is big against not just Trae Young, the entire Atlanta team, getting into them early, bringing that energy, deflections. That's something we love to see from the Nets. When they're playing great defense, we see a lot of deflections, a lot of loose balls, and getting after it a little bit. Jack, what are your thoughts on the Nets playing zone in this game? Do you think they should look to play zone or stick to the man? What are your thoughts on that, especially against a team like Atlanta who's turnover prone?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about that in terms of how it depends on the team and how we think they can react to the zone. So I think, you probably use it in spurts in terms of a lot of the time it's used off of makes. So then you can get back and it's not in transition, obviously, because it's just impossible to get set when it is in transition defense. So I think we will see it at times tonight. I haven't watched a lot of the games super closely, so I can't say how much it's been used lately. But I think against a team like Atlanta, who I don't think necessarily they will take the three, though. That's one thing at the same time. They'll happily just take the three ball if you're just going to leave them open on the perimeter, because I think that's where the Nets have been a bit poor in terms of the zone, being able to get to those guys in the perimeter and get a hand up there. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Obviously defensively, we just need to keep throwing looks and doing what is best practice. If it's not working, call a timeout, and Coach Kennedy just goes, no, let's go back to the man-to-man. So I think we will see some of it tonight. How much we do, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I think a lot, and you brought up a great point, the three-point shooting. Atlanta will let it go. They have Alex Len shooting threes now, Dwayne Dedmon shooting threes, almost everybody on the roster shooting threes. So if they're knocking it down, I don't think you can really play the zone unless you do an excellent job in the perimeter, what the Nets haven't necessarily done in the past. And I think sometimes against a young team, it can confuse them. But if they're a good three-point shooting team, which they're okay, they have a lot of guys who can get hot, I think man-to-man's a little bit better because you just kind of force them to make plays. In a zone sometimes, it'll allow the team to get open looks without even really making plays just because the zone has its holes.
It does. The zone definitely does have its holes, but I think that's where the Nets have been best in terms of just throwing different looks and executing in terms of whatever the looks might be it zone, be it man-to-man. And I think just being engaged and together and cohesive. But SSV's chimed in again, Nick, and I think this is an interesting question. Should the Nets experiment with Davis and Allen with the upcoming matchup against the Pistons?
Yeah, we kind of discussed this, I want to say, around the Detroit matchups before, and I wouldn't be completely opposed to it. I think you maybe experiment with it for a couple minutes, but in that case, you probably have to activate Allen Williams for those games just because you don't want to leave yourself open, because if one of those guys were to get into foul trouble, now all of a sudden, you're playing Rondé against Andre Drummond, and that necessarily is not going to work. I'm not as scared as Blake Griffin because his games become more perimeter oriented. You know what I mean? He's a lot more outside. Obviously, he can still rebound well. But I think the Nets won't do that. I wouldn't be mad if they tried it, but I would be surprised if they did.
Yeah, I think forecasting forward, and I don't think we might not have enough time to do a pregame for that one, but just thinking ahead, I think that Rhodey is probably going to be a likely matchup for a guy like Blake Griffin in terms of his length, his size, not in terms of physical size, but just in terms of how tall he is. And I think he can disrupt at least a little bit. We sort of saw at points against Kevin Love, him sort of playing a job on him, playing a role on him. I don't think you're going to necessarily limit a guy like Blake Griffin, who has been and will have his sort of revealing in the top 50 soon by myself and Corey. But he's been a top 10, top 15 player this season. You know, he's been in the MVP conversation at times. So I think it's going to be incredibly hard to nullify a guy like him. But a guy like Andre Drummond, in a sense, I think it's going to be a little bit easier, not letting him get sort of easy boards and such, you know, and whether that is putting a guy like Ed Davis on him a bit more to make it a bit more physical, make it a bit more troublesome for him, or Jared Allen just being able to stretch a little bit and make him work in the pick and roll a little bit more off screens. So I think that there's ways to sort of nullify those two big men, but they're one of the best sort of front courts in the NBA going around right now.
Yeah, definitely. And they're kind of more of almost an old school. I know Blake's a little bit more perimeter oriented, like I said, but he's still a big body. I think what you want to do against Detroit is try to get Andre Drummond in foul trouble. He likes to try to block a lot of shots. I think the Nets have guys that can get to the rim and get him in foul trouble. Obviously, it depends how the refs call the game, but that'd be something I'd try to do.
Absolutely. Before we do leave, though, thank you, Will. Thank you, Zane. Thank you, SSV. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yeah, appreciate it as always. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Check us out iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, NetsRepublic.com, Dash Radio, and YouTube. Also, quick shout out for OTG Basketball doing a giveaway. Hit up the Twitter page, retweet and follow. A chance to win a ton of NBA gear. So check that out. And we'll be live for the post game as well.